Whenever we speak about boundary issues, we most often hear questions like, how do I handle my husband's lack of intimacy? Or, what should I say to my wife when she overspends? We find it difficult to answer questions like these because often we don't know the details about the couples.
A husband who is not intimate may be distant because he has trouble trusting people, including his wife. Or maybe he's self-absorbed. Or maybe he's just normal and it's his wife who has unrealistic expectations.
A wife who overspends may have problems structuring herself, or she may be in denial about a very real financial problem. Or imagine this, she might even have a controlling husband.
Boundary issues in marriage always require an understanding of the situation. So we believe that in the long run, learning principles really helps more than learning techniques. And that's why we talk about the laws of boundaries, not just as practical strategies, but as principles by which to structure your own marriage.
These laws of boundaries are not about marriage as it should be. They are about marriage as it really is. Like the law of gravity, the laws of boundaries are always in force, whether or not we are aware of them. These laws lay the foundation of how responsibility works in life. Let's look at the first one.
The first law is the law of sowing and reaping. Simply put, this principle means that our actions have consequences. When we do loving and responsible things, people should draw close to us. When we're unloving or irresponsible, people withdraw from us. Whenever Randall was angry or upset, he would withdraw from his wife Amy and their kids. Amy would handle Randall's mood. She'd try to cheer him up and coach everyone on how to walk on eggshells around Dad. But Randall was sowing seeds of anger, selfishness, and withdrawal of love, yet he was not paying any of the consequences. He had no reason to change because Amy was dealing with his problem. You see, things don't change in a marriage until the spouse who is taking responsibility for a problem that is not hers decides to say or do something about that. Doing so helps place both the sowing and the reaping with the same person, and that begins to solve the boundary violation.
The second law of boundaries is the law of responsibility. We are responsible to each other, but not for each other. Spouses may help each other with the burdens of life, and they should, like financial burdens or health or emotional crises that come along. But ultimately, each person must take care of his own daily responsibilities, including one's feelings, attitudes, values, the handling of life's everyday difficulties. A proper view of responsibility is necessary to set limits in a marriage. If one spouse feels no sense of responsibility to the other, well, this spouse is, in effect, trying to live married life as a single person. On the other hand, you can't cross the line of responsibility. It's your responsibility to not take ownership of your mate's life.
The third law is the law of power. This law clarifies what we do and what we don't have power over. We don't have the power to change someone else, but we can influence them. We also have the power to confess and submit and repent of our own hurtful ways and then be willing to change. Specifically, we must acknowledge that we have no power over the attitudes and actions of other people, but we can influence them, and influence really has its own power. You and I also have the power to confess, submit, and repent of our own hurtful ways, to ask for God's help, to be willing to change, to identify ways we are contributing to our own marriage problems, and, over time, to change the unhelpful ways we are dealing with these issues. You see, spouses often try to use boundaries to assert power over a mate, and this doesn't work. The fruit of the Spirit is self-control. It's not other control. Furthermore, nothing is more conducive to a spouse's growth than a mate who really and sincerely wants to change.
Fourth, the law of respect states that if we wish for others to respect our boundaries, it's our responsibility to respect theirs. See, we can't expect others to cherish our limits if we don't cherish their limits as well. We all get excited about finally being able to say no, to set limits, and to become free to choose. But we don't feel as excited about hearing no, about having our spouse set limits, and about having our spouse make choices on their own. But mature adults desire the freedom of others as much as their own. granting of freedom to one's spouse is one reason why the law of respect fosters love. After all, loving your mate means desiring and protecting his or her freedom of choice. It means dying to your wish for your mate to see things your way all the time, and appreciating that she has her own mind and values and feelings. Respecting and valuing your mate's boundaries is the key to being close and loving. Your spouse experiences the gift of freedom from you and sees the love you're extending by giving this freedom. When you respect your spouse's boundaries, you're paving the way to having yours respected as well.
The fifth law of boundaries is the law of motivation. This law states that we must be free to say no before we can wholeheartedly say yes. See, no one can actually love another if he feels he doesn't have a choice not to love. Giving your time, your love, or your vulnerability to your spouse requires that you make your own choice based on your values and not out of fear. To the extent that you're free to say no, then you're free to say yes. And this is why sometimes it's just good to say, I can't wholeheartedly say yes to this, so I'll have to say no at this time. After all, no spouse in his right mind really wants a mate who complies with his wishes simply out of fear.
Take some time now to consider how these 5 laws apply to marriage in general and to your marriage in particular.